Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Okay, there's only a few more praying, that should be fine. For those who are staying behind, inshallah, you can use the edges, the walls before they're taken by the young ones. Yeah. You let your father first stay there. That's your positions, huh? Hamza, come here. Come forward. Guys, come forward. Alhamdulillah wa sallallahu wa sallam wa baraka ala rasulillah wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa man walahu wa ba'd. Rabbi shrah li sadri wa yassir li amri wa hlul 'uqdatan min lisani yafqahu qawli. اللهم ابسط علينا رحمتك وانشر علينا من حكمتك وافتح لنا فتوح العارفين ولا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم يا رب العالمين. Our last previous class we had, which was last Saturday, if I'm not wrong, not this Saturday that passed, the week before that. It was a very important session, vital for all the students and all the brothers, or maybe those who are watching online, of the sisters, because it was literally explaining the bridge between what we have covered and what we are going to cover now. Unfortunately, there was a technical problem. That's why it wasn't recorded. Yeah, so anyone that attended, فَلِلَّهِ الْحَمْدُ وَالْمِنَّةِ. Those who did not attend, I am not going to repeat it again. Yes, it's quite in-depth, and I'm only going to repeat it, and I'm publicly saying this, in Ma'had Mustafa, that's it. Otherwise, if we do that, we're not going to continue. We won't progress. But I'm just going to literally give you some lamahat, something, nubda of what we covered, so you can understand exactly what did we look into, and then what we are doing today, inshallah. What we covered mainly, we looked at something called the hukm, the ruling of the sharia, mainly. And we said, just to touch on, there are three main types of ahkam. The hukm itself divides to three. There is al-hukm al-aqli, the judgment of the mind, and then al-hukm al-adi, which is the natural judgment, how the body works, for example. And then you have al-hukm al-shar'i, that you and I do not establish. It's directly from Allah. It's like, for example, today we say it's natural for Muslims to pray. No, it's not natural. It's a part of their tradition, which they were not dictating by them. They haven't dictated it by themselves. In fact, they were taught by Allah through the Quran and mainly through the Sunnah. Sallu kama ra'aytumuni usalli. Pray just like how you saw me pray. Alaysa kadhalik? So the reason why we always say our tradition, especially as Muslims, tradition is something that is literally dictated by the community, for example, and it is common practice in there. For example, we have something called culture. If you look at people's cultures, you realize that there are things which they cannot ignore. But then they do not come above the hand of the Sharia. The Sharia always does what? Precedes that of culture's practices. So for example, if a culture has something which is against the Sharia, can we practice it? No, we can't. I'll give you a very simple example, and I know this is very random, but we notice, I think many of you notice, when there are weddings being conducted in our families, there are certain things that they do, especially the ladies, which the Sharia in itself does not allow them to do so. And then while they're doing the wedding, they literally, hell breaks loose. They do whatever they want to do. And even if you tell them, no, that day your command doesn't work. Some of you are literally having some secret smile because you know it's the truth. And it's a fact. Does the Sharia want that? No, the Sharia doesn't want that. But it doesn't mean that if they do it, then it's okay as well at the same time. Does that make sense? So to them it's cultural, and to us as well. We have our downsides as well. But it doesn't mean that the Sharia has allowed it. It doesn't turn a blind eye. So if something is haram, it's haram. If something is permissible, it's permissible. So when it comes to al-hukm al-shar'i, we mentioned that أقسام حكم الشرعي خمسة ترام. They divide to 5. But then before that, we were looking into something called al-hukm al-wad'i, and then we were looking at al-hukm al-taklifi. I don't want to get into that details. What we covered, however, from the tayammum and also the wudu and the nawaqid, the nullifiers of wudu and tayammum and all of those, and the ghusl, those are known as al-hukm al-wad'i, the prerequisites of the actual deed, al-maqsad al-asma, the main intended goal to be achieved. Those literally fill in the gaps for that deed to be fulfilled. Ya ayyuha alladhina amanu, إذا قمتم إلى الصلاة, when you establish salah, إذا قمتم. Now, if someone is quite shallow in the language, والمشايخ يقولون لنا هذا دائما, if someone's language is quite shallow in Arabic, when they read it directly, like you find someone who does not know anything about Islam, and they're not a Muslim themselves. You see this a lot online nowadays. And because they've read some Arabic and some translation in the Quran, they tend to say, oh, the Quran says so and so, and the Quran says this and this and that. And then when you read, إِذَا قُمْتُمْ إِلَى الصَّلَاةِ, قُمْتُم, yes, qum means stand. But it doesn't actually mean stand alone. كَلِمَةٌ وَاحِدَةٌ قَدْ تَكُونُ لَهَا مَعَانِي. This one word can have different type of meanings. But then you can have something which has multiple words to translate it. Now the word qumtum over here is when you want to establish. And then if you look at Arabic, either means it's a condition. You have to consider. إِذَا قُمْتُمْ. So when you establish, so it doesn't mean that I'm in salah. So that means it's before salah. So what do I do? فَغْسِلُوا وُجُوهَكُمْ. Wash your faces. وَأَيْدِيَكُمْ إِلَى الْمَرَافِقِ. And your hands to your elbows. Something which is literally a tangent that I'll bring to you to look at how the ulama, don't look at the madhahib, just look at how the ulama were and how in depth they were prepared. Understood? How good they were. Yani, in Arabic, what do we call them? Tabahharu. They are oceans in knowledge. A Maliki scholar sits down with a Shafi'i scholar and they're discussing on the issue of وَامْسَحُوا بِرُؤُوسِكُمْ. And when it comes to wiping your head. Now, the Maliki scholar is asking the Shafi'i alim, why do you say in the Shafi'i madhab that you can literally just wipe part of your head, some of your hair, and not all of it while you're doing wudu? Where do you get that from? The Shafi'i alim says, Allah says, وَامْسَحُوا بِرُؤُوسِكُمْ, and wipe part of your hair. But then the alim asked them, does that mean when Allah said فَاغْسِلُوا وُجُوهَكُمْ وَأَيْدِيَكُمْ إِلَى الْمَرَافِقِ وَامْسَحُوا بِرُؤُوسِكُمْ وَأَرْجُلَكُمْ? So that means if Allah included the feet as well, and then when we went, and as you go further, it says فَاغْسِلُوا بِوُجُوهِكُمْ. There's something that says بِوُجُوهِكُم. I don't want to go into the verses, a bit long. But when it says بِوُجُوهِكُم, does that mean part of the face? Does that mean part of the foot? Silence. Immediately. Understood? Because to the Maliki scholar, the ba'un lil ilsaq wa laysa lil ba'diyya. It means everything to the Maliki scholar. Understood? Not for some, not part. So when Allah said to wash over your face, it means your entire face. To wipe your head, your entire head. That's why for us, you wipe your entire head. It doesn't matter how you start. Even if you're going to go like this, it doesn't matter. Because the rest is just either sunnah or fadila. Do you still remember the difference between a sunnah and a fadila? For those who attend the classes. I'm going to ask you, what's a sunnah? Which one is above, by the way, sunnah or fadila? Anything. A sunnah or a fadila, which one is above the other? No. Sunnah first. Sunnah comes after fard. Remember this and I will constantly remind you. It goes into grades. This entire text that we've been covering is always been like this. A fard, then a sunnah, then a fadila. Does that make sense? Fard, sunnah, fadila. How? Fard, farida, a sunnah, and then a fadila. And then that's when you combine everything else. It becomes as one deed. So when we're studying about how to do ghusl, for example, like ghusl al-janaba, if you have a janaba, if maybe a woman wants to do her tuhur after menses and that, you study the fard of ghusl, the farida, the fara'id basically, and then you study the sunan of the ghusl that comes after that, and the sunnah, literally the practice of the Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And then the fada'il, which are the fadila, the same practices, but they were not that frequent. Does that make sense? That's the difference. A fard, you cannot ignore it. You don't do it, it's nullified straight away. Sunnah, the Muslim Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he frequently did it, every now and then. And the ulama, as we said in one of the classes, if you go back, in one class, we mentioned that this word in itself, this kalima sunnah, every single field, scholars in their field have a definition for it. The scholars of hadith, they define sunnah differently. The scholars of fiqh define sunnah differently. The scholars of usul, they define sunnah differently. Understood? That makes sense? But now we're looking at in terms of fiqh. In terms of fiqh, constantly repeated. And a fadilah, he did it, but it wasn't that frequent. But it completes. In a sense, we can say mutammimat. It literally completes and perfects your deeds or your action that you're trying to do, inshallah. So now you know what we covered last class that we had. The bridge between what we have done and what we are doing. So what are we doing now? We're not doing al-hukm al-wad'i, we're doing al-hukm al-taklifi. Al-hukm al-wad'i are those things that you require in order to fulfill the actual deed itself, such as salah. You cannot do salah if the time has not entered. You cannot do salah if you do not have wudu. You cannot do salah if you have not reached the age of puberty. It doesn't mean that if you do it, it wouldn't be accepted. It would be accepted, but it's not obliged upon you. Does that make sense? It's an obligation upon you if you've reached the age of puberty. All right? And I don't want to mention which belongs to where. We don't want to go there. It's going to be a long topic. Today, what do we have? Now, what we have specifically is salah. What everyone has been anticipating. All those days, some have even mentioned, we don't want to know about wudu. We want to know about salah. We're here now. Babun fi dhikri fara'idus salah. A chapter in mentioning the obligations of salah, wa sunaniha, and its sunnahs, and fada'iliha, and the meritorious deeds which are below the sunnah, and makruhatiha, and what? The makruhat, the disliked acts. Now he doesn't mention the muharramat of salah, those which literally nullify your salah. He doesn't mention over here, which is basically some deeds which you can do or you can ignore and all that. He doesn't mention that. Why? Because first of all, as you know, and as we said, this is one of the most simplest, smallest texts for beginners that can study their deen. That's why the book only covers that which relates to salah to a certain extent, and it covers only fasting. Khalas, nothing else. And fasting, it doesn't even go to that much extent. It only gives you what you need. There's no zakah, there's no hajj, there's no shahada, there's nothing besides those. And as we said, you find that there are some abwab you wouldn't find here, you'll find in other texts which are smaller texts. Matn al-Akhdari in the Maliki school, you notice that it covers somewhat the chapter of hayd, which women should study, and husbands. We always just look at women should study the chapter of hayd, menses, and postnatal bleeding and that. Actually, husbands should study as well. You have a woman at home, and perhaps Allah has blessed you with girls. A scholar came to another scholar, and this other scholar has girls at home. His friend of a scholar asked him, have you taught your girls? The girls have become balighat. They have literally passed the age of puberty now. Have you taught them about their cleanliness, their tahara, their hayd and that? The scholar said no, because he feels quite ashamed to mention it. This other friend of his, whom both they are scholars, reprimanded him harshly by telling him, what type of a father are you? What type of a alim are you? To alienate them from their study and to find this so taboo, which the religion itself, the faith itself, and Allah did not find it taboo. وَيَسْأَلُونَكَ عَنِ الْمَحِيضِ, and they're asking you of hayd. قُلْ هُوَ أَذَى, it's something which literally, it does annoy. فَاعْتَزِلُوا النِّسَاءَ فِي الْمَحِيضِ وَلَا تَقْرَبُوهُنَّ حَتَّى يَطْهُرْنَ. If Allah mentioned that at the very beginning of the Quran, and He clearly uses these words, mahid, hayd, and how do you go into a state of tahara? What should you do in this state? And Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam teaches his wives to teach the other wives, and he teaches his sahaba so they can understand. Then what's the point of being a husband? What's the point of being a brother if you have a sister? Does that make sense? But what the world that we live in today is we are living in a state where we don't look at women anymore similar to ourselves. We literally look at women as a different type of being. If it was possible, they wouldn't have been human beings. Subhanallah, ma'al asaf, women are so sexualized to a level where on a car marketing advert, you literally find a woman driving. How does that relate? A yogurt ad, you literally find a woman eating the yogurt. Where are the men? Why are they not taking in yogurt and show some muscles that there's some proteins out of it? Understood? Or maybe literally, education. Does it really have to be a lovely little girl wearing hijab and she's the one on the poster? Always, everywhere. Because women have been objectified, especially in the era that we live as shaitan, haymanat. Hayman ash-shaytanu alayh. Shaitan has literally took over the reins. That's the world we live in. And there is something we can do about it, but as the Messenger ﷺ has predicted it, we have to agree with it as well. But what do? We educate ourselves. When you realize that, you stop objectifying women, we stop looking at women as certain type of beings, and we don't look at them in a certain way anymore. Actually, we include them inclusively as part of a community. And that's when you look at them as mothers and sisters and also companions when Allah blesses you with one. That's how it works. So these masail are not masail placed in fiqh for the purpose of people ignoring them. Actually, they're there to save the ummah. That's why. Now when it comes to salah, now over here, he says that فَأَمَّا فَرَائِضُ الصَّلَاةِ فَخَمْسَةَ عَشَرٍ. In this text, you find that the fara'id of salah, they are what? They are 15. The obligations of salah, they are 15. While in other texts, some of them say actually they are what? 17. In other texts, they say it's 13. While in other texts, they say it's 12. So which one do you take? You can't.
17 actually.
Actually, as well you can't. As well you can't. You can't do that. فرائض الصلاة 12. All right? فنية بقلبه معتبرة. The fara'id of salah, according to Ashal al-Masalik and what we take, they are 12. Mainly they are 12. Because there are some included, some which are not included. That's why. So this ikhtilaf shouldn't really be an issue. But just know baseline, we start with 12. Take it as 12. And you can add in the rest if necessary. As we go along, we'll explain to you which one belongs to the sunnah, which one belongs to the obligations of salah. But something to mention to you, realize this, for the young ones that ignore salah a lot, I really appreciate seeing young faces, mashallah, especially at this time, while they should be preparing themselves for bed and tomorrow they have school. May Allah bless you, and bless your souls, and make you ulama one day. However, salah, compared to every other obligatory deeds that we have, is the only one which Allah has favored this nation alone, not every nation. All of the other nations have not been favored with that it was prescribed in the seventh heavens. That is enough to show the importance of salah, which Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, this ummah will literally face its demise when that time comes, and it will begin. Number one, naqdul hukm. What is that? The unknotting of the rule. We were not going to rule the world anymore. There was a time we did. Politically, we're nowhere. Let's be honest. The Quran has become obsolete. Fiqh that we are studying today has become obsolete. There was a time that this which we are studying today, it was not just cherished. If you understood fiqh and you were the alim of fiqh, the alim in Arabic, the scholar in the 23 sciences which Rasulullah ﷺ left behind for us, you were the celebrity then. But today just become a da'i that you can literally yap a lot, khalas, you're the da'i. Honestly speaking. I might sound harsh, but you know the reality. If you want to know really that you're benefiting in a gathering that you're going to attend or an event, is when you leave there, you've took some notes that are going to literally guide you in your life. Wallahi al-azim. Or at the very least, He softened your heart and you're constantly going to remember one word out of that. But if you just went there and cherished the gathering and enjoyed the event because of how magnificent it looks, or the type of people that were there because they were celebrities, then that didn't mean anything. If you leave this today, and I hope so, if you leave here today and you've understood how to pray properly at least and covered some basis of salah, then trust me, that's what's going to take your life forward and that's what's going to open the doors for your Jannah. And it has always been my aim. I've never wanted to be a da'i. But all of what I wanted is to be a talibul ilm and nashirul ilm. A seeker of ilm and the one who spreads ilm. Khalas. That's enough for me. No matter how small the crowd might be. Honestly, today we have good numbers actually. Noor knows that. Ba'da Isha better or before Isha? Understood? Now when it comes to salah, I want to give you the definition which I want you to write it down. It's really important. It's going to explain to you everything about salah. Salah, istilahan, by the definition of the scholars. I wouldn't want to give you the linguistic definition. You don't need to know that. The actual definition of it, if you can write Arabic. Qurbatun, write it in Arabic if you can. Qurbatun, if you have a pencil, or if you don't, I'll give you mine. Or if you have a memory, memorize it. Qurbatun, fi'liyatun. I'll say in English, don't worry. ذات إحرام ذات إحرام قربة فعلية ذات إحرام وسلام أو سجود فقط. قربة فعلية ذات إحرام. You know what ihram is, right? Allahu Akbar. وسلام, السلام عليكم. أو or سجود فقط, only. سجود only. وسلام. Yes. مفتتح الصلاة and the end of salah. The opening of salah and the end of salah. The finishing of salah. وسلام أو سجود فقط. I'll tell you why. Do we have just salah randomly or do we have types of salah? What's the answer? Barakallahu feekum. Correct answer. Okay, now I want you to help me. When it comes to the types of salah, what types of salah do we have? Fard and sunnah. Simply. I don't want to go into depth. Okay. When it comes to those, the fara'id of salah, these fard of salah, how many are they? 7? 12? How many salahs do we have? 5. Jazakumullah khairan. When it comes to sunnah, yeah, for the one that we do in the masjid after the nafil basically, isn't it? But do we have any other types of sunnah? Give me another one. Barakallahu feek. Rak'at al-fajr. Another one. After sunrise, that's duha prayer. Huh? Salatul dua. That's another type of prayer. Salatul khawf. Witr. I just want the simple one, guys. I want the simple one. MashaAllah. Everybody has become a sheikh now. Yes. Tahajjud, yes. Look, I'll tell you what. You want to understand this? One mistake I used to do when I was studying this, I used to think so far. You shouldn't. It's clear as day. It's right in front of your eyes. So don't hurt your head. Just focus right now here. So for example, if I ask you for extra sunnah, let's say some sunnah prayers, don't think far. What are the prayers that you do commonly every day? We've mentioned nafil, we mentioned duha, rakat fajr, 2 rakat before fajr. What about tahiyatul masjid? Where is it? Duhan tarawih ma'a tahiyyati. What's about salat tarawih? Maybe I didn't hear it. Yeah, لمسجد ولم تفت بالجلسة. All of those. Salatul witr, مثلا, or the 2 rakat before witr. But in the ahnaf is all 3 together. Like those, isn't it? But then the definition tells you It is an act which draws you close to Allah. Qurba means something that you do. For example, we say qurbani, isn't it? Come Eid al-Adha, we have something called qurbani. Why is it qurbani? It brings you close to Allah. And salah is known as a qurba. Those deeds which literally draw you close to Allah. But then it's fi'liyah. It's a deed. In Arabic, fi'l is actions. Understood? And it's not just actions, actually physical actions. But then the scholars say these physical actions are of three parts of the bodily limbs. The body divides to three. You have the heart, and then you have the tongue, which is connected to the mind, and then you have the other limbs. Does that make sense? Can the heart really act physically? Does the heart act physically? Does it? Barakallahu feek. It does. Spiritually, it does. That's why you have emotions. Sometimes you're sad, sometimes you're angry, sometimes you're happy, sometimes you're okay, you're neutral. So the heart is acting. Understood? When you go through anxiety or panic attacks, your heart is overworking. That's how it is. So they include the heart. I'm going to come to explain that. Then they include the tongue. I want you to think, where does the tongue work in salah? And then you have the other bodily limbs. Does that make sense? So they say it's qurbatun fi'liyah. But then they say that which contains ihram and salam, or not and. Listen to me carefully. That's why they say the ulama of fiqh, they are very good at doing what? Tafkikul ibarat. Breaking down a ibara, a piece of phrase. Why is it aw sujudin faqat? Or a sujood? Why? What? Why? Such as? Barakallahu feek. The reason why they said oh sujood is because, for example, like Salatul Janaza is a type of prayer. It is a prayer, but it doesn't require sujood. Understood? And you'll find this in the Tajreed of Ibn Arafah. In Hudud Ibn Arafah, Rahmatullah alayhi, Ibn Arafah, he explained that this is the definition of Salah. Whereas in other madhahib, perhaps, I'm not sure, they provide a different definition. But this one is shamilun wa jami'un wa mani'un. For one to provide a definition, especially in fiqh, there are ashara shurut. You need to fulfill these 10 conditions for a definition, and then it will be a definition. So imagine the work that it goes through. That's why salah is that deed which draws you close to Allah and requires the action of the entire body. Understood? Which contains ihram, because no salah does not contain ihram. Every single salah has an ihram. Every single salah has a salam, but not every single salah has a sujood. Although majority of the salah, 90% of the salah, they have a sujood. Does that make sense? And some salat, they don't even only in one rak'ah, they don't have one ruku'. Actually, they have 2 ruku's. Think. Can anybody tell me? No. Huh? Sajda? Sajda is sujood. There's a salah that has 2 ruku's. We're going to cover that, don't worry. If the book will provide.
In the Quran.
I have 2 ruku', he said.
2 ruku's. In one rak'ah, it has a sujood, of course, but it has 2 ruku's in it. Huh? ثم الكسوف ركعتان عندنا زد كل ركعة قياما وانحناء. It's Salatul Kusuf when there is a sun eclipse. Understood? ثم الخسوف لانجلاء البدر. Salatul Khusuf is when eclipse on the moon. Alright? Salatul Kusuf is when we have sun eclipse. Sun eclipse. For every rak'ah, zid kulla rak'atin, every single rak'ah, qiyaman, a standing, and one hina. In hina is ruku'. So you have 2 standings, you have 2 ruku's. And it's the only salah that you'll have that. Does that make sense? We don't have it so often, that's why. That's why it seems a bit strange, isn't it? Barakallahu feekum. Okay. Now, how do we include the heart? How do we include the tongue? And how do we include the body? Now, the first fard of salah is an-niyyah. Any one of those who've attended classes, have you noticed how much niyyah keeps on returning every single time? That's why Imam al-Nawawi rahimahullah ta'ala, when he started his 40 hadiths of al-Nawawi, the first hadith is, and I constantly say this, إِنَّمَا الْأَعْمَالُ بِالنِّيَّاتِ. Indeed, deeds are but by intention. There's a reason behind it. Every single deed you do requires an intention. You mess about with it, that deed means nothing. It's like, for example, you give someone, simple, you give someone £50. Let's say it's public. Or it's not public, it's literally just between you two. The intention behind it, it will determine why you gave it to them. You give them the £50. You want to give it to them because you know they're in need of it. You're either giving it to them, you want to help them, that's the intention, or you're giving it to them because you want to humiliate them. But would that person know or have any idea? Of course not. And when you give it to them, perhaps you want to do it for noble reason, but you're giving it as your zakah as well. Isn't it? You're giving it as zakah as well. Does that person know that it's zakah? Of course not. So the intention determines why you're doing that deed. The only person that can have access to that is who?
Allah.
It's simple. That's why I told you, don't think far. It's literally here. It's simple as that. Allah is the one that has access to our hearts. No one else. فَالنِّيَّةُ قَلْبِيَّةٌ. Niyyah is a deed of the act. Does that make sense now? Barakallah fiqh. We'll come to the tongue and you'll realize. Number one, an-niyyah. When do we utter the niyyah? عند تكبيرة الإحرام. During the takbiratul ihram. Now, do you say the niyyah after the takbiratul ihram for, like, let's say 1 second or two? Or do you say it so early? No, it wouldn't be accepted. In fact, some ulama, they were so strict to say, you make the intention the moment you want to say Allahu Akbar. But some were quite easy to say, if your house is literally a few feet away from the masjid, not your house is 20 minutes away, like mine, no. If your house is literally just down the road, you just come out, let's say where Nurul lives. From there he leaves the house and he says, I'm going to pray Fajr, mathala. As he walks, he's already made the intention, and his intention is first to enter the masjid, immediately to pray Fajr, not come in, pray Tahiyatul Masjid, and then pray his rak'atayn before Salatul Fajr, then do, no. Because there are hurdles now. Understood? But let's say, for example, he's done his Tahiyyah, he's done his Raghiba, we call it Raghiba in the madhab. After that, now it's time to pray Fajr, which is, we call it Subh as well, to come pray Salatul Subh. In that time, while he's waiting a little bit, maybe he's left how many minutes? 7 minutes, 6 minutes, 5 minutes. He already made the intention, I'm going to pray Subh, you're fine. You will do that. But the best one is which? You stand, you clarify it. You say, I'm standing to pray. Now there's an issue. You can either just say, I'm praying for certain salahs, or you have to specify what salah you're praying in that intention. So there's two times. There's a time where you can just say, I'm praying. And there's a time, this is mutlaqun niyyah. You just make an intention that you're praying and you pray. But there is the type of prayer where you have to specify what salah is, which type of prayer that would it be. You have to make the intention. So for example, if you're praying Salatul Subh or you're praying Dhuhr, basically the 5 daily prayers, you must specify. You're praying that Dhuhr which you're praying now. Don't forget your question. Hence, in our madhab, in the Maliki madhab, we do not accept, we invalidate the salah of the person who finds another person in the masjid praying after the imam has concluded the prayer, or there is no salah going on in the masjid, and then you just come in and say, tap, let's go, let's carry on. Pray together. No, you don't. Why? Because the vagueness of the niyyah, these intentions are not one. You don't know why this person is praying. Let's say for example, Hussein or Hassan, isn't it? Hassan, right? Yeah, mix Hussein and Hassan. Hassan is praying, but it's Dhuhr time. I can literally see he's praying Dhuhr. The Imam has concluded prayer actually. He's praying Dhuhr. I come into the masjid and he wants to do his salah, and then as he just says Allahu Akbar, I follow him. and I'm certain, like literally he's praying Dhuhr, can I follow him? No. There's a reason behind it. Perhaps Hassan has a prayer of yesterday's Dhuhr which he did not pray. And now he has to pay off. Or actually he did pray, but maybe he was in a position which he didn't know that he didn't have tahara. Sometimes, let's say, it happens a lot. Don't think it doesn't happen. It's very common actually. You might have had a wet dream, or maybe as a husband, you had a halal relationship with your wife, and then as you left, you forgot to take a bath, a ritual shower. Or whilst you're doing the ritual shower, there's a limb, a prominent limb as a fard limb, let's say a whole hand, you forgot to wash it. And in the madhab, you have to wipe over it, rub over the limbs. Let's say you didn't rub over that limb. When dhuhr time came of the second day, you realized, oh, I messed up in my ghusl yesterday. Now I have to pay off that dhuhr first. You don't pray the current dhuhr, you pray that of yesterday's. Now this is another mas'ala. How many dhuhrs would it take for you to now just focus on the current one and then pay off the other ones? Rather than focusing on yesterday's one first and then pray the one that you have in hand. It's getting a bit technical, isn't it? Forget about it. But I'm just trying to make it clear for you. When it comes to intention, I'm coming back to this point again. So Hassan might be praying dhuhr, but maybe that dhuhr he is praying is from yesterday's one, because he remembered, oh, I had to clear myself from yesterday's purity, purify myself again, pray of dhuhr of yesterday, and then pray today's dhuhr. That's why I cannot follow Hassan. But what if I'm praying and the Imam is literally leading salah? Definitely the Imam is leading salah, which is the current salah. The Imam cannot lead salah, which is yesterday's salah. Otherwise, he will invalidate everyone's prayer. And on the day of Qiyamah, I will hold you accountable for that. For real, actually, I don't want to go to hell. Understood? That's how detailed fiqh is. Now, this is when it comes to intention. Now, this, we're going to conclude on intention over here. I don't want to go into depth more. We're going to focus on intention, we're not going to finish. And as I want us to do is focus on the second fard of salah, second rukn of salah. The second rukn of salah is takbiratul ihram, is saying Allahu Akbar. We said that salah requires three parts of the body: the heart, the tongue, and the body itself. Now when you say Allahu Akbar, where is it coming from? The tongue. Does that make sense now? And then there is the Fatiha, there is the Surah, there is the Tasbih, and all of those. So you say Allahu Akbar in salah. Now if you come in salah and then you say Allahu Akbar, would that be accepted? And I'll tell you this today, I'll say it very clearly. Many of the brothers that do iqamah before salah, they mess up a lot. They either say Allahu Akbar, or they say Allahu Akbar, or the Akbar, which they're supposed to mention they say Wak. Yes, Wakbar. Is that accepted? That type of lahn, that type of mistake is known as lahnun jaliyun, a very clear mistake. And that nullifies your salah. Would your takbirah be accepted? It would not be, especially to the Shafi'iyah. The Shafi'iyah, they are so strict that if you make a mistake in the Fatiha, such as to say Alhamdu, not Alhamdu, your salah is invalid. In the Maliki madhab, in a sense, we turn a blind eye. In a sense, we turn a blind eye. Now, if you say Allahu Akbar, just like how I said it, Allahu Akbar, and your alif hamza was not as clear as it's expected to be, it's fine. But you should not say Allahu Akbar and think it's fine. No. You would invalidate your takbiratul ihram. And many people do not pay attention to that. Does that make sense? And when you utter the iqamah wrong as well, it makes the iqamah not to be accepted. Luckily, the iqamah was sunnatul iqamati al-mufaddala. The iqamah in itself is a sunnah. So even if you make a mistake of it, it doesn't invalidate salah. It's just part of a tanbih to bring to people's attention that it's salah time. All right? But I advise you, ikhwah, the Quran class that is running here every Monday, mashallah, evening. And if you find any other Quran class that will be running, hopefully there's Sunday classes after Maghrib, inshallah, going to be running. You must go and learn. I advise you, look for a Quran teacher and don't feel embarrassed. The Sahaba learned the Quran as they were old. And this deen does not determine who's old and who is young. The problem we have is that it's a stigma. Why should I learn while I'm old? While in reality, every single day you're ruining your deeds. So when you say Allahu Akbar, you must be careful on saying Allah. How would it feel, for example, Allah is Lafdul Jalala, the name of Allah, mainly Allah's name. Forget about the other names. Ar-Rahman, Ar-Rahim, Al-Malik, Al-Quddus, Al-Salam, Al-Mu'min. Forget those. Allah is the first name you mention every day. If your name is Muhammad, does it feel right for you for someone to constantly call you Mo or call you Muhammad? Does it? If your name is Ibrahim, you're Ibrahim, you're Ibra, you're Ibi. I've heard a lot of those. Understood? You don't like it, right? Because it's your name, it's your identity. Then how about Allah? Think about it. It's basically common sense. So when you go to learn about that, you don't go and learn because you want to correct your Quran alone. Go and learn because you're honoring Allah. And by honoring Allah is raising your status. You don't raise your status to people. As your status rises to Allah, people will recognize you automatically. Allah does that. It's within the nature of this deen. Understand that always. Does that make sense? So second of all is takbiratul ihram. Now, something which I really find it important to mention so that we can finish off, inshallah. I've kept this for so long and I've been keeping it. And when it comes to the salah itself, I must teach it very quickly so many of us can learn our mistakes. I've noticed some brothers that come to the masjids, and I've closed the book. These masail are in my head. Some brothers, they come in the masjid and they are reverts, mashallah. Allahu Akbar. They've embraced Islam. And not only some of those, some of them are even born in Islam. And you know firsthand. But the third rukn of salah is Al-Fatiha, Suratul Fatiha. Now this surah, what's the hukm of it? Man lam yuhkim qira'atuhu, the one who cannot put together the reading of it, batalat salatuhu, his salah has become batil. Now when the ulama say that, who cannot read it does not mean cannot read it at all. Although that's the first stage. But also it's included within it those who cannot read it properly. Because otherwise you will be changing the meaning of the Fatiha. If you cannot pronounce ha properly, that's a problem. You cannot pronounce ayn properly, because look, I'll tell you this. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Okay? If you say alameen, alam, the word alam is more related to the word pain. Alam. While the alam, it means the world. Now do you see the difference? Alif and Ain literally change the meaning of the word while these are words so close to one another. Understood? Kalimat mutajanisa. That's what the Arabs call it. Kalimat, which literally they share something in common. And these ones, they share the second and the third letter together. But the first one is different. Ain alam. Alam. Does that make sense? Ar-Rahmani Ar-Rahim. You say Ar-Rahmani, you haven't pronounced Allah's name properly yet. Maliki Yawmiddin. Iyaka na'budu. Na'budu. Abad. Abad means forever. At-Ta'bid is making something stay for good. Now while Allah is mentioning Na'budu, we worship. You've changed the meaning from worshipping and now keeping it forever. For Allah, we want forever from you what? That's what it means. وَنَسْتَعِينَ اهْدِنَا الصِّرَاطَ الْمُسْتَقِيمِ. Now some either pronounce sirata, and that doesn't exist actually, or sirata. Ta is missing. صِرَاطَ الَّذِينَ أَنْعَمْتَ عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين. And if you say ولا الضالين, that's not pronouncing dad, that's pronouncing dal, or pronouncing va or any other letter. Does that make sense? You can pay attention a little bit. All right? So we need to be careful when it comes to the Fatiha. Now what do the ulama say? If a person just embraced Islam and salah time is literally going to enter in 5 minutes, that person has to be assisted immediately by the one who is close to them and teach them Fatiha. Immediately they have to learn it, memorize it. Now look at this deen. This deen is not the type of deen which the education system today tells you to keep it in the books and libraries. The deen tells you to keep your mind intact. Memorize every bit of knowledge you can. And you can literally see it in Salah. How can you be a Muslim if you cannot recite Fatiha? How can you be a Muslim if you cannot even at least read Surah Al-Ikhlas or Surah Al-Kawthar so you can lead your Salah? How can you be a Muslim if you cannot read At-Tahiyyatu Lillah? At-Tashahud. How can you be a Muslim if you don't know exactly what to say when it's needed for you to say it in that type of deed? When you go to Hajj, when you go to Umrah, when you do whatever you want to do. How can you enjoy Islam if you cannot memorize some part of Quran? So you realize it's about the mental agility and ability, because Islam builds our minds and keep it intact, because the biggest machine and the greatest asset man has is this. And the greatest asset you would forever have is not the wealth, is not the goods you have or the materials, is actually the knowledge you contain. And you can see it through the entire deen. The basic of what's required is to memorize the Fatiha. If a person embraces Islam, they do not memorize the Fatiha, that salah is invalid, especially if they're praying alone. But what if there's a jama'ah going on in the masjid, and for the time being they can follow the jama'ah? Luckily, the madhab allows that if the imam would read Fatiha, the ma'mum doesn't have to read it. سقط على المأموم. The ma'mum is forgiven. So because of that, this person who embraced Islam is not required to recite Surah Al-Fatiha, and their salah is valid. But what if they're praying alone and they don't know Surah Al-Fatiha? They cannot pray. Now, khilafan lil ahnaf, different from what the ahnaf say. The ahnaf say, in a sense, and this is a qawl in the madhab, not that it's the main. It's just a qawl in the madhab, an opinion, that you can read the Fatiha in a different language other than Arabic. But that's not the correct opinion. The correct answer is you have to read it in Arabic. That's why they say when it comes to Fatiha, it has nearly 12 conditions. And it has to be in Arabic. Does that make sense? Yeah, and I'm not going to mention the conditions. Not today, not tomorrow, not even when the salah, the class goes on. Otherwise, we're going to stay here forever. We've stayed here forever anyways, today anyways. Understood? The Fatiha is that important. Now for the person who makes a lahn, if it's a lahnul khafi, if it's a minor mistake, forgiven. Major mistake, as we said, that it could change the meaning of the word, فَصَلَاتُكَ بَاطِلَةٌ. In the shawafi', lahn khafi or jali, every lahn is a lahn. Your salah is not accepted. I remember I was walking with a Shafi'i sheikh, and mashallah he's a very strong Shafi'i, and he knows the madhab properly, in and out. He has studied Minhaj of the Imam al-Nawawi, of Imam al-Nawawi's text. Minhaj is about 16 volumes, if I'm not wrong, and it contains the entire Shafi'i madhab. Guys, when you look at madhab, you think madhab are literally just minor. This is the subject that conducting the entire affairs of Muslims. Without fiqh, we cannot handle anything. That's how we pray, that's how we eat, that's how we fast, that's how we deal with our family, that's how we deal with even breathing. Because fiqh is what we learn how the Prophet ﷺ lived. Understood? This sheikh, he went to this masjid, and the imam literally, and I would say personally, he wasn't making those type of mistakes that, okay, this salah is invalid. No. But he was making mistakes. The sheikh was very angry. And he went to the committee of the masjid, change the imam, or I'll make sure this masjid is closed. Yes. That's how serious they are. But this shows you the seriousness of Surah Al-Fatiha. So we've learned only 3 arkan of salah. The faridah is the rukn as well. The pillars of salah. Understood? If you break one, you invalidated your whole salah. Now the rest of what we're going to learn, inshallah, they can be put together bidhnillah al-kareem. But the important ones were these 3. Sallallahu wasallam wa baraka ala nabiyyina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam. If you have any questions, I would only take 2 so we can leave. I've heard the brothers for so long. Yes?
I have a question normally. Most of the, I'm not saying most of the imam, they've done mistake when it comes to Surah Fatiha. Ghaib. They inside say غير the rap, they change it to dal.
I mean, they shouldn't do that. And that person should not lead salah.
Even that it sound غير instead of غير.
If they pronounce it as dal and they know they're not pronouncing it properly, then he shouldn't lead salah. Yeah, he should not lead salah. Yeah. He wanted to ask a question first. But you don't worry, you'll ask yours. You'll ask yours, yes. Yes, Ibrahim. After you.
Regarding the niyyah, like you said, I wanted to say, do you have to just make niyyah in your mind, or you have to alter? This is what I wanted to ask.
Yes, مسألة النية يقول العلماء أنك لا تتلفظ. You do not utter it. Understood? You do not utter it. Like if it's to a muwaswis, a person has chronic doubt, it doesn't matter what madhab, you have to utter it, otherwise you ruin the salah. عند الحنابلة عند الأحناف وعند الشوافعي عند المالكية, everyone. Niyyah is important. Now,
Sheikh, all my life, when we are standing behind the Imam, we don't say Fatiha. All my life. But now, from last 1 year, after Imam, I read Fatiha as well.
there's nothing wrong with that.
No, but give me explanation.
It's
There will be not enough question for my heart. Is there no problem?
the ulama, they differed on this reason because
Madhahib or
it's-
Maliki or Shafi'i
it's an issue of how the ulama understood these texts. Because Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he recited Fatiha as the Imam, and on top of that they say that Al-Fatiha is the mother of Salah. The Shafi'iyya said you must recite it after the Imam, and you must complete it even if the Imam has gone to ruku'. That's how strict they are. But where the dalil stands is that, and especially to many of the madhahib, is that if the Imam recites it, then he has taken away the burden from you. Understood? Huh?
Not understand. My question is, for example, if there
That's why they say على الإمام ثالثها قراءة بالحمد. The third is to recite the Fatiha على الإمام, upon the Imam وحده, only the Imam. The Ma'mum doesn't have to read it. والفرد, and if a person is praying alone. Yeah.
So, is he talking about like the Isha, first two rakah you recite, the last two, that one Imam is right, that one you must do it, isn't it? This,
No.
even that one.
Even that one.
Then come to the issue of the person who just embraced Islam. What do we do about him then? Or her? And then would that mean if that person on the last two does not read Fatiha, that their salah is invalid? Understood? So there's no difference of raka'at. It's only what's happening in the raka'at.
There was one brother, because I was practicing, because I don't know if you have noticed that, especially when you Maghrib and Isha, there was an echo of Surah Fatiha.
He reads along.
Yeah, he read loudly.
I think I know him. Yeah.
Yeah, he read
I
loudly.
think he knows him.
Read loudly. So I approached the brother because I said that we said that no, because the must say that.
That's
we should follow it.
if within him he cannot stop it, there's nothing you can do about it. But it's just a matter of advising him not to.
Advise him.
Yes.
Like the,
Now when the Imam is reciting, he follows along.
Yeah. And he does the loudly.
Loudly, yes. Loudly.
You prayed along his side a lot.
Sheikh, anyway, I'm always
Yeah, you read
No, don't confuse yourself. Go back to what's normal. What you used to do before.
No, that one is not here.
Just know this. Let me tell you. It's very simple.
that one.
Second, some of them are saying I listen to this is read after Imam. If you don't read, your salah is not complete. Third, let me finish. If you come the third place, for example, when you are finishing your rakat, when you go to ruku,